So you want to get a girlfriend in ancient Greece. Good news! The ancient Greeks basically invented the concept of romantic love. They wrote poetry about it. They built temples to Aphrodite. They had a word for the feeling of your heart leaping when you see someone beautiful. Bad news, the actual dating scene was an absolute disaster. This is the real story of love, courtship, and marriage in ancient Greece, and why the most romantic civilization in history made it nearly impossible to meet anyone. First, some geography. Ancient Greece was not one place. It was hundreds of independent city-states, each with its own laws, customs, and opinions on basically everything, including women. And that distinction matters enormously for what we are about to discuss. Because when most people say ancient Greece, they mean Athens. And Athens, brilliant, democratic, philosophical Athens, had one of the most restrictive attitudes toward women in the entire ancient world. So let us start there. Step 1. Find her. In modern dating, this is the easy part. You go outside, you exist near other people, something happens. In Athens, this was already a problem. Athenian women, particularly those from respectable families, spent most of their lives inside the house. The Greek home was divided into two worlds. The andron, the men's room, where business was conducted and guests were received, and the gynaikonitis, the women's quarters, typically at the back of the house or on an upper floor, away from the front door and away from anyone who was not family. Respectable Athenian women did not wander around the city. They did not attend dinner parties. They did not go to the agora, the marketplace, at least not according to the ideal that aristocratic Athenians liked to project. One Athenian writer considered it a mark of honor that his wife had barely been seen in public at all. That was considered a compliment. So where could you actually encounter a woman in Athens? Religious festivals were your best option. The Panathenaic procession, the festival of Thesmophoria, though that one was women only, which immediately rules you out. Funerals were another occasion when women appeared publicly, which tells you something about how limited the options were. The theatre, possibly, though historians still debate how many women actually attended. That is more or less the list. Step 2. Talk to her father. Here is where modern dating instincts completely fail you. You are not courting the woman, you are courting her father. In Athens, every woman had a kyrios, a legal male guardian. For unmarried women, this was usually their father. For widows, it could be a brother or son. The kyrios controlled essentially all of a woman's legal and social life, including who she married. You did not ask the woman, you asked him. And what you were really doing was negotiating a contract. The groom's family and the bride's family would agree on a dowry, property or money that came with the bride and technically remained hers, but which the husband managed. This was a serious legal and financial arrangement between two households. Romance was not a required component. The bride herself may have had little or no say in the matter. She may never have met her future husband before the wedding was arranged. In some cases, she may not have met him until the wedding day itself. Step 3. The wedding. If you have successfully negotiated with the father, congratulations, you are getting married. The night before the wedding, the bride underwent ritual bathing with water from a sacred spring. Her childhood toys and belongings were dedicated to the gods, a formal farewell to her previous life. On the wedding day itself, the bride was veiled. The ceremony involved a procession, a feast, and the transfer of the bride from her father's house to her husband's house, typically at night by torchlight with music and singing. The moment of the anacalypteria, the unveiling, was when the groom saw his bride's face clearly, often for the first time. This was the big reveal. And then she moved into the gyneconitis of her new home, and the cycle began again. Because for a society that made it so difficult to actually meet anyone, the ancient Greeks thought about love with extraordinary depth and sophistication. In 385 BC, Plato wrote a dialogue called the Symposium, a record of a dinner party where several notable Athenians, including Socrates himself, took turns giving speeches about the nature of love. One of those speeches was given by the playwright Aristophanes, and it is one of the most beautiful and bizarre explanations of romantic love ever written. Aristophanes argued that humans were originally very different creatures. We had 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 faces. We were round and powerful and came in 3 types: male-male, female-female, and male-female. We were too powerful, so Zeus cut us all in half, and ever since, he said, each half has been searching for its other half. That yearning, that desperate, aching desire to find the one person who makes you feel complete, is love. This is where the idea of a soulmate comes from. Not a romantic film, not a Valentine's Day card, a very drunk ancient Greek playwright at a dinner party. Socrates then stood up and politely explained that Aristophanes was wrong, before giving his own account of love as a kind of philosophical pursuit of beauty and wisdom. This is also the conversation where Socrates mentions that he learned everything he knows about love from a woman named Diotima, a woman, teaching Socrates about love. Which brings us to the most interesting loophole in the Athenian system, the hetairae. If Athenian wives lived in the gyneconitis and were largely absent from public intellectual life, there was another category of women in Athens who occupied a completely different social position. The hetairae were educated, independent women, often from outside Athens, since foreign women were not subject to the same restrictions as Athenian citizen women. They attended symposia, they engaged in philosophical debate, they chose their own companions. The most famous hetaira in history was Aspasia of Miletus. Aspasia became the companion of Pericles, the most powerful man in Athens, the architect of the Parthenon, the leader who guided Athens into its golden age. And Aspasia was so intellectually formidable that Socrates himself is recorded as visiting her to discuss rhetoric and philosophy. Plato mentions her. Multiple ancient sources describe men bringing their wives to hear her speak. Pericles, by all accounts, genuinely loved her. He divorced his first wife to be with her. He kissed her every morning when he left the house, and every evening when he returned, behavior so unusual that people commented on it. The great irony of Athenian society is that the women who had the most freedom, the most education, and the most intellectual engagement were precisely the women who existed outside the respectable system designed to keep everyone separate. But here is the thing. Everything we have discussed so far is Athens. If you had lived in Sparta, this video would be very short. Spartan women exercised publicly. They ran, they wrestled, they were educated, they could own property, manage estates, and express opinions freely. They were famous throughout the Greek world for saying whatever they thought. When a Spartan woman sent her son off to war, she reportedly handed him his shield and said, "Come back with it, or on it." Spartan men were away training from the age of 7. Spartan women ran the household, managed the economy, and operated with a level of autonomy that Athenian women could not have imagined. If you wanted to have a conversation with a woman you were not related to in ancient Greece, Sparta was your answer. Athens gave the world democracy, philosophy, theatre, and the Parthenon. Sparta gave its women the right to exist in public. So what does the evidence actually tell us about love in ancient Greece? That it was complicated, that it varied enormously depending on where you lived, who your family was, and what class you belonged to. That the Greeks who wrote the most beautiful poetry about desire and longing were usually writing about something other than their wives. That Plato's Symposium, the greatest exploration of love in the ancient world, happened at a male-only dinner party. And that somewhere in the middle of all this, Aspasia and Pericles found each other, and he kissed her twice a day for the rest of his life. The Greeks invented the idea of the soulmate. They just made it almost impossible to find one.